So Compassionate Kauʻiokawēkiu is a collaborative ʻāina-based Hawaiian-informed trauma responsive initiative that started in 2019 by partners representing the Castle, Kailua, and Kalaheo complexes of the DOE, as well as Windward Community College and the Harold KL Foundation, Castle Foundation. We are guided by the wisdom of our kupuna, community leaders, families, and educators, and our intention is to support a culture of aloha. We work toward this by supporting our schools and our communities to be responsive to individual and cultural trauma in a strength and gift-based manner as we cultivate well-being through connection and empowerment. Our events are funded through the support of the Department of Education, as well as the Novo Foundation, Education First, the Rockefeller Foundation, and the Nale Aloha Foundation, all of whom we send our heartfelt mahalo. And I'd like to introduce our special guests for today. Venus Rosete Medeiros is the Chief Executive Officer of Halikipa, a multi-service, fully accredited 501c3 nonprofit that specializes in working with youth who have been historically oppressed and marginalized. She has spent over 35 years serving our community, our children, the youth, and their families. And her background extends from working with community-based organizations, private and public school systems, the prison system, public housing, and community grassroots initiatives. She's developed several culturally relevant curriculums and programs for youth and families in Hawaii and coordinated several community building projects on Maui. She was born and raised in Maui and is a proud graduate of Kamehameha School's Kapalama on Oahu. She holds degrees in communication studies and public administration, but she says her most important knowledge comes from life experience. She's married and has 6 grown children. In her free time, she enjoys spending time with her ohana and volunteering for community events. Welcome, Venus. Thank you so much for spending this time with us this afternoon. We are so grateful. I just want to turn it over to you now.
Mahalo, Gail. Mahalo, everyone, for joining today. I am looking across my screen here, and I see so many familiar faces. A lot of people I've worked with in the past, a lot of you who have done some fabulous work here across our ʻāina, our state, and mahalo for everything that you guys do for our keiki and our ohana. And I see I have some of Halikipa's staff on as well. So there's many of you who probably heard this presentation before. So like Marty, I see Marty Yuan and others. Feel free to jump off if you want to. I don't want to. It's okay if you jump off. Like I said, I know some of you have already heard this, but stay on so I can see your face. That's wonderful as well. As Gail had mentioned, I've been doing this work for a long time, different capacity. Started off like a youth worker, you know, ground, like just right there working with kids. And then here I am today at Halikipa. Majority of my work have been on Maui, as Gil also mentioned. But I'm happy to be here and share some things that I've learned from my kupuna. I offer, you know, this presentation, and you know, as I tell people all the time, eat the meat, spit out the bones, things that you want to like ho'oma'ama'a, you know, you want to embrace and hold dear. Feel free to do so, and however it can help your work. But so aloha mai kākou, welcome to Cultural Humility, Understanding a Native Hawaiian Perspective of Child Well-being. I'm gonna share my screen, Gail. Is that okay? Okay, there we go. Okay, can you guys all see that? All right, thanks, Lola, for the thumbs up. Okay, so mahalo joining me this afternoon, and I hope that by the end of this presentation, you'll find that it wasn't a total waste of your time. You can walk away with one yellow opihi, okay, one golden nugget I'd be happy. So let's holomua, we go forward. You know, I believe that we come into this work with keiki, opio, and ohana with our own biases that impact the way that we relate to others. And it's important to self-reflect and self-correct our own biases so we can better serve the ohana. You know, we're just human, right? So being aware, you know, self-aware of when we're stepping in with our own biases and when we have to kind of step back and create that space in order for us to be able to truly engage with those that we're serving is super important. So, change here. So let's talk about cultural humility. Cultural humility really means opening up a conversation in a way that generally attempts to understand a person's identities, you know, related to their race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, what else? Education, their social needs, and others, right? It's having that place where you just want to engage in a conversation. Basically, what Stephen Covey says, right? Seek first to understand, then to be understood. I think it was his 5th habit. You know, which can be defined as having a frame of mind and a heart that listens with empathy to others first before seeking to be understood in all of our human interactions. That's how I look at cultural humility. So in Hawaii, Hawaiian culture, when we're thinking about, you know, just the culture here in Hawaii, it's not only our host culture, but our root culture. And so for many people who are coming to Hawaii to share their ike, their mana'o with us, it's important for them to also understand our culture here in Hawaii, right? Because we do things a little bit different from others. That's why Gil and I were just having a conversation earlier about, you know, we have the resources right here in Hawaii to be able to help each other. A lot of times we tend to bring different speakers, which is great too, because we can learn, right, from the continent. But if they don't put it into the context that we understand it, you know, then sometimes it goes right over our head, right? Or it's important for us to take that ike, that knowledge that they share, and see how it relates to our people here in these islands, because we are different. You know, to live in Hawaii is very special. You know, we believe that if we honor the practices and the values of our root culture and the values of this āina, right, then our Kānaka ʻōiwi is our native people and others will thrive. So I'll use some terms as I go through this presentation, but I'll try and say the English as well. But like when I speak about our people, I'm talking about Kānaka ʻōiwi is really about our native people, yeah, who have ancestors here that we continue to learn from. So the well-being of Kānaka ʻōiwi is intrinsically tied to the relationships to āina, which is our land and our sea, to akua, to God or a higher spiritual being, and to Kānaka, other human beings. And this is the way that our Kānaka ʻōiwi related to one another. So it is important to recognize the interdependency in order to understand the importance of these relationships. Yeah, so let's look at where we are today with our keiki's well-being. If you look at our foster care data, we see that Native Hawaiians, part Hawaiians, Kānaka ʻōiwi have historically and continue to be overly represented in multiple state structured systems, including our child welfare system, right? So here we see that the number of Native Hawaiian children in our foster care from 2017 to 2021. In 2017, of all the children in Hawaii foster care system, approximately 46% of them were Kānaka ʻōiwi. As you can see in the data, it appears to be trending down, right? But however, Kānaka ʻōiwi children are still over 40% represented in the foster care system. Now, this presentation will shed light to information that could assist those who are working with our Kānaka ʻōiwi families. And my hope is that this information I shared today will help to support positive engagement with these families, and in turn decrease the number of Kānaka ʻōiwi children who's currently in our child welfare system, and promote keiki well-being. So what does it mean for us as we look and engage with families in Hawaii? See, in short, we must assess the needs, right, of each ohana, and then plan with the ohana how to meet those needs. So let's look at equality versus equity. Equality means everyone gets the same thing, right? So same, as we put it. Equity means that all of our keiki and our ohana get the support they need to develop their full intellectual, social, emotional, linguistic, and physical potential. Equitable engagement and practices include working with ohana to create connections that extend and enrich the well-being of the keiki, opio, and their ohana. So we must ensure treatment that is fair and just, considering the capabilities of individuals while not discriminating because of their racial identity, their ethnicity, their gender, their religion, ability, or any other aspect of their identity. The concept of equity goes beyond equality. See, equality would imply that identical treatment of individuals or groups despite their differing needs. The response to our ohana cannot be a cookie cutter, right? One plan fits all. We must consider what the actual needs of each family, each keiki, and plan accordingly. Here's an example of the differences between these concepts of equality, equity, and justice, okay? So we look at equality. The assumption is that everyone benefits from the same supports. This is equal treatment, right? We say. Ohana is given the same amount of fish. No matter what the ohana looks like, we give them the same amount. That's equality. Now, when we look at equity, everyone gets the supports they need. This is the concept of affirmative action, right? Thus producing equity. So ohana, if you look at the composition of the families, ohana are given a fish per family member. That would be equity. Then we take it a step further and we look at justice. What is the cause of the inequity in the first place? And we start to address those issues. So the systemic barriers are improved by empowering our families. That would be justice. So if you look at each one of these families here, we give them the resources and the training that they need so that the ohana can learn to fish and provide for themselves. You see that? So the first family has a net, the second one has maybe a bamboo pole. And then the third family is the one with the reel, right? So can pick up more fish at one time to help those families. So everyone is given different resources. So let's talk about the family itself. Let's talk about our ike kupuna. And as we work with families, we have to understand how our Native Hawaiians actually viewed ohana and where we came from, and understand the value and the connection that we have as family members. So we look at the mo'olelo of Haloa. And I know many of you have heard this legend before, but this legend talks about in Hawaii long ago, the goddess Oh, I'm sorry, did I change back? The goddess Ho'ohokulani and the god Wakia birthed a stillborn son named Haloa Nakalau Kapapalini. And when night fell, I tried to read my slide. They buried him to face the rising sun. Ho'ohokukalani grieved at his grave, her tears making their way from her eyes, down her cheeks, and falling to meet the soil that covered her son. One day, from Haloa Nakalau Kapalili's burial spot, rooted the kalo. To honor their deceased son, Wakia named the stalk of the kalo Ha, and the length Loa. The corn he named Oha. When the Oha is removed from the mother plant and replanted, another plant will grow. It is thus from Haloa Nakalau Kapalili that the ohana, the family, was named, rooting human genealogy in the ʻāina. Ho'ohokukalani went on to birth another son, who she named Haloa Kānaka, after her first son, who became the first Kānaka ʻōiwi. Kānaka ʻōiwi are said to be keiki o ka ʻāina, children of the land. It is from the ʻāina that Kānaka ʻōiwi grew, and it is through the ʻāina that Kānaka ʻōiwi will be sustained. See, the story of Haloa is fundamental to how Kānaka ʻōiwi relationships were established. We see in this mo'olelo the reciprocal relationship to respect and care for who and what provides for us. So the kalo plant, also called taro, is where life literally began for Kānaka ʻōiwi. See, the plant and its supreme importance of Kānaka ʻōiwi is known and revered as their ancestor. This acknowledgement comes with a great amount of respect and connection to the plant and its multiple uses, right? So the kalo also serves as a symbol of the ohana. So let's break it down as to why so many working with families actually utilize the kalo plant as their logo. I mean, even Halikipa, in our logo, we use the kalo plant, yeah, the lao. And many others, when you think about, I can name a bunch of them. Maui Youth and Family Services, Town and Family Services. I mean, a lot of them will use the kalo, right? Epic, ohana. So we'll break it down and we'll see why this metaphor or this reference is so descriptive of their work with families and ohana. Here's a kalo plant, right? So if you look at the very thing that catches your eye when you look at a kalo plant, what do you see? The first thing you look at, what do you see?
The leaves.
The leaves, exactly, right? So when you look at the leaves, we call that the lao, right? The leaf. It can actually represent our keiki. So our keiki, when you think about it, when you look at a kalo plant, it's facing upwards, right? The leaf, it's facing the sun. The first thing you see. And it's in the shape of a heart. How cool is that, right? Now, when you see a family, you go to a family's house or you go to a luau, whatever, who catches your attention first? The keiki, right? You see the kids running around. They're the first thing that catches your eye. It's kind of like the kalo plant, but connected to the lao or the leaf is the ha, is the stem. Now the ha can represent the makua that holds up the keiki, right? Now the ha, if the ha goes down, what happens to the leaf? It too goes down. So for many of us who work with keiki, we have to understand the importance that you can work with keiki, but if you're not working with the makua, right, the parents, then kind of poho, okay? Because you gotta work with to strengthen the family, the parents, in order for the keiki to be sustained. Because at the end of the day, they go back home to their makua, right? So even like with Halikipa, some of the things that we're doing now, we've been working with youth for over 53 years. We're starting our new ohana resilience support service center, where we're going to be working directly with families, because we're aware that even all the work that we do with our keiki and our opio, at the end of the day, they return back to their families. And so we have to have a component in our services that works with the parents directly. Okay, then connected to the ha, we have, what is that? The oha, right? The bud, and we have the kalo. The kalo is the makua, right? That's the makua, the source. And then from the kalo, we have the hulu hulu, or the a'a, the fibers, the roots that goes into our kupuna, right? Those who have come before us, our ancestors, our roots. And the oha that comes out is our offshoots, right? Where the ones that gets replanted and goes into another plant. So what does this tell us when we look at this kalo plant? That we're still eating the kalo that our kupuna, our ancestor, planted hundreds of years ago, right? Because those of you, how many of you have worked in a lo'i before and you harvested kalo? Right? When you take out the kalo, you're going to cut the huli and you're going to replant the same huli into the lo'i, right? So when you plant it, that kalo is the same kalo that was grown hundreds of years ago. So when you look at it, it is used as a metaphor for the ohana that continues for generations. Yeah, if it is carefully tended to and replanted within the right conditions, that kalo can last forever, forever. That's nuts. Because when you think about our families, right, what we sow into our families, right, can last forever. The lessons, the teachings, the values can continue on forever. So when we look at the lo'i kalo, okay, the kalo is grown in the lo'i, a patch of land specifically set aside for cultivation. So the kalo can be grown using wetland or dryland fields. Although the wetland, which is really fun, yeah, when you go into the wetland and work with that kalo, it's been known to actually produce a lot more, a viable harvest, like a lot more, because as you can see in that picture right there. Kalo is an important plant, right, for our Kānaka ʻōiwi. And it's from the plant that we get some of our favorite foods like poi, laulau, you know, luau stew, what is it, kulolo, right? And in order for the lo'i to produce food and edible kalo, there must be cold water constantly flowing in the lo'i so that it doesn't get stagnant. And without the consistent flow of cold water, the kalo will become loli. You call it soggy, tough, watery, yucky. So you have to make sure that the way that we're tending to the lo'i kalo is maintained well, and that we have the water flowing constantly. We call that the awai, right? So the awai that comes through, that feeds into our lo'i system, is the irrigation ditch that brings the fresh water to the lo'i. And everyone who lives along this ʻāwai is responsible for keeping the waterway free of debris and ensuring that the water that flows is always kept clean. So since it's flowing into the lo'i where the food is growing, everyone's kuleana was to make sure that the ʻāwai was, when the plants would fall and cause like a blockage in ʻāwai, it was people's responsibility to make sure that they would keep the debris out of it so the water could keep flowing. Awe, okay, is an expression or a remark made by Kānaka ʻōiwi when something is not being taken care of. Their kuleana in the system, in that ʻāwai system, that's awe. So we can easily see how the ʻāwai can also be used as a metaphor for the work that we do daily. So everyone has a kuleana to do their part, to malama the system, so that every ohana can benefit from each person taking care of their kuleana and therefore producing that healthy kalo that we partake in. Everyone has a role. So what does this mean for us and our work? Well, we use this metaphor to really look at the dynamics of how, number one, the kalo is reliant on the lo'i kalo in order to grow, and how the lo'i kalo exists to support the kalo. And we see that there is an interdependency in place. And then you also have the ʻāwai, right, that feeds into this system. So tending to the kalo or the lo'i maybe have different roles, might come with different responsibilities, but it's created to work in unison with each other. So when we reflect on our roles here, all of you on this screen, right? And we reflect on our own kulana. So kulana is our role, and our kuleana is the work that we do, our responsibilities. So if we're all working together to promote child well-being, where would you place yourself? Okay, are you working directly with the kalo? Directly with keiki, opio, ohana? Or we call that direct services, right? Are you tending to the lo'i? Do you have a role in the administrative parts? Are you providing administrative supports for the kalo to grow? Okay, are you the lo'i kalo? Are you part of the ʻāwai that feeds that system that supports the work with ohana, keiki, and opio? Yeah, where would you place yourself? See, because when we're working as part of the child welfare system, okay, whether in DOE system, DOH, DHS, or if you're a nonprofit or a community-based organization, etc., we must look at the work as a system that serves many parts to nurturing and supporting the ohana, just as if we were cultivating kalo. So some of us may be doing the direct service with the keiki and or makua, and some will be tending, which would mean that you would be tending to them, right, and their needs. Some of us would be providing, like I said earlier, that administrative support in ensuring that the processes, the procedures are relevant and appropriate in creating a healthy environment that will foster the success of the ohana. And in the same way that we would tend to the lo'i, so that the kalo would flourish. So sometimes, like I said earlier, the interdependency, right? You cannot go without. You need both. And some of us, might be setting up the infrastructure in that system work. Okay, so like when I look at state workers, when I look at those who are making the decision in our, legislature process, all of them, they would be part of the ʻōiwi that helps to feed the work that we're doing, that sets up the funding sources, that sets up the laws, the regulations, all of that for us to follow. Some of us may, once again, who are working in the system, you got to pay attention to the ʻōiwi to make sure that we're keeping it clear from obstacles that may create challenges for the kalo to grow. That's a very important kuleana. You know, right now we're in the legislative process where they're, you know, passing bills and they're going before conference now. I mean, these are important things that we continue to address, the obstacles that's preventing us from doing good work and the things that we need in order to be able to do the work that we've been called to do, right? That we need to submit different bills in place. So no matter what kulana, what role you play in keiki education and well-being, your kuleana is an important one. Acknowledging and appreciating each other's role and responsibilities and delivering on your own kuleana is critical for the welfare of our keiki and our opio and ohana in the system. So let's look at our kauhale system, okay? Back in the day. Because today, when I think about what we're trying to do is, you know, when we're looking at how we're taking care of our āina, for instance, you know what we're reverting back to? We're reverting back to our kupuna, our ike kupuna, right? Things that our kupuna would practice. You know, after we desecrated our āina here in Hawaii, now we're like, oh my gosh, what have we done? And then now we're going backwards and we're trying to relive and relearn and practice what our kupuna were practicing years and years ago, hundreds of years ago. In the same way that we're caring for āina and we're fighting for our āina rights, we should be doing the same thing for our keiki and our ohana. Same thing. See, the kauhale system provided an opportunity for Kānaka ʻōiwi to establish a way of living pono, being in balance with each other. Akua and the āina, everyone understood their kuleana, their responsibilities to these relationships. And although the living may not always have been harmonious, yeah, not everything was perfect, there definitely existed a sense of dependence on each other's skills in order to thrive and live well. Today, we've taken on many things, what's best for me, what's in it for me, instead of the we. And we know that back in the day, family needed each other. From when you look at the ahupua'a system, right? From Mauka to Makai, we all needed each other to do each other's work, our own work, so that we could keep that harmonious way of living. And everyone was cared for. So I want to talk about a little bit about the child welfare system. Okay, I'm just taking this one system. And we have, you know, we have the fostering system in place and all of that. Back in the day, we had a system. We had a child welfare system. It was called Hanai and Luhi. See, when we knew that a family could not care for their child for whatever reason, we would hanai that child, right? We would have someone take in that child and that child became their own. They would raise that child as their own. That was the system that we followed to ensure that every child was being given the care that they deserved, right? They had a right to be loved and cared for and provided for. That was our hanai system. The luhi system, we had another word, luhi, where a child or another person tended and raised with devoted care, to care for and attend with care and affection. It was like the protege of a parent, right? And this was like a temporary care. So when you look at our foster care system today, it's kind of like luhi. It's temporary and the child returns. Once the family is able to care for the child again, or maybe the family had to go to a different island to take care of a kupuna or something, and they were going to come back. So it was kind of like more of a temporary care. That's kind of like our foster system today. Hanai is more like permanent, like they would hanai and take them in as their own. So we would be kind of like we call it the adoption, right, today, where you adopt a child. But, you know, when you think about hanai, it's, you know, people use that term very loosely. Oh yeah, this is my hanai sister, this is my hanai brother. So if when you think about it, we've taken many of our practices and we've kind of watered it down. I hear people like all the time talk about, oh yeah, we're going to ho'oponopono. Well, ho'oponopono, you know, don't water it down. It was like what ho'oponopono is an actual practice where, you know, people go through a ritual. Like they come together, they're all on the same page. Like, you know, there's different roles that people assume when you're doing an actual ho'oponopono. Today, we practice maybe ho'opono, where we just make things right? But I think there's a lot of Hawaiian values, a lot of Hawaiian practices that have been watered down. And so when we look at hanai, I mean, you're really talking about if I make, if I die and I hanai someone, that child gets equal as my children that I actually hanao, that I actually birth. I mean, that's how deep that hanai practice was, right? That this child becomes like your own. So my point here is that we had a system. And then all of a sudden, cha-chang, right? Colonization. So the impact of colonization, we cannot turn a blind eye to it because it continues to impact us today. From the initial introduction of foreigners to Hawaii, Kānaka ʻōiwi have experienced various historical traumas. From the Great Mahele that introduced an unfamiliar concept of land ownership, right? Where back in the day, we steward our land, because going back to the story of Haloa, the kalo, you cannot own your brother, right? How can you own your brother? So we never practiced land ownership. We practiced stewardship. We could care for our brother. We could steward, you know, our land. And so that's exactly what we did. So that unfamiliar concept of land ownership to the loss of our language and our cultural practices, like the pule, the hula, different things, the oli, all of that we were told were sacrilegious or were, what do you call that? That term, yeah. Anyway, you know what I'm talking about. Like that it was like kapu, right? You can't do it. With this came the loss of self-determination, self-confidence, self-esteem, and self-worth amongst our Kānaka ʻōiwi. Like all these foreign concepts. You know, there was a film years ago that came out called Then There Were None. If you ever have a chance to watch that, it's a story of Elizabeth Lindsay, right? So she had put together the story of what happened over the years with our Kānaka ʻōiwi and the historical trauma. And then she uses her own immediate family as an example of what happened. When you look at the impact of historical trauma and how it impacted our Hawaiians back in that day, today, we still see a lot of the trauma continuing in our families. But due to time constraint, I would love to show you the film, Then There Were None. It's about 25 minutes long. I'm gonna just show you a quick clip. Here, let me just, hopefully I can get this on, by Dr. Naline Andrade and the late and great Haunani K. Trask regarding the impact on colonization and historical trauma on Native Hawaiians. So let me try this.
The fact that Native Hawaiians in this state rank as having the worst health status. That includes cancer rates, diabetes, heart disease, cardiovascular disease, and mental health. With the mental health issues specifically are suicide, drug abuse, and other substance abuses, particularly crystal methamphetamine and alcohol. We also have bigger problems in terms of family discord.
What do you two think, what are the root causes of the problem that you articulated so well, the higher incidence of disease, of substance abuse, of alcoholism, of family discord? What are the root causes of there being such a high incidence among some of the Native Hawaiians versus other groups?
I know what Naline is talking about. Actually, she and I worked together many times. I think that part of the origins of the problem stem from the fact that we are a dispossessed people. We are not in control of our destiny. We are not in control of our land base. Ever since contact, which is 1778, contact with the West, we have had a terrible problem with trying to regain control of our destiny. First, the impact of Western diseases, which really results in a tremendous decline of our people. And we're still living with that legacy today. Then coming into the period of the overthrow in 1893, a humiliating act of taking away our self-government. And then in 1900, forcible citizenship in another nation called the United States of America. During the territorial period, listed as a non-self-governing people with the United Nations. No sense of control. And I think that's reflected in the kind of problems that Naline is talking about. People cannot feel that they are whole in their universe, which is the Hawaiian way of looking at the natural environment, if they have no control over their destiny. And then you get the kind of behaviors that Naline is talking about. Hawaiian health, prior to the coming of the Western world, was very much focused on the spiritual in combination with the physical. Once that's severed, the Hawaiians feel that they have no control and no real place for themselves. And that results, I think, in the kind of problems that Naline is talking about.
Yeah, I think I'd agree. And what you've really summarized is when you look at disease in a biopsychosocial model, Hananike has really summarized very nicely the psychological and especially the social impact. And if you fit that together with what we're seeing in terms of statistics, you're really talking about the biological and the psychological manifestations of colonialism and of just a severe devastation of our people.
Yeah, so how's that? That was actually aired on K5 in 1991. It was called a program called Island Issues. You could tell from the guy's suit, yeah, that it was back in 1991. And the topic was Native Hawaiian health. Now, this is a thing. The story remains the same today. That was 1991. Okay, so what's going on? Let's look at what historical trauma, what played out, okay? Our loss of language. After Western contact, our kupuna, makua, and keiki were prohibited for speaking their language and punished and shamed for doing so. Schooling for Hawaiians became focused on vocational blue-collar studies. Well, children of English-speaking families were schooled in the arts, literature, sciences, and math. Look at our loss of spiritual practice. Kānaka ʻōiwi relationships to āina, Keakua, and Kānaka are fundamental to their existence. These pilina, or these relationships, are deeply nurturing, caring, and cultivation. Pule, or prayer, is a natural to the Kānaka ʻōiwi as breathing. It is an acknowledgement of the sacredness of all that sustains life. And yet we were told we cannot do that any longer. Loss of land. Land ownership was not something Kanakas understood. So no one owned the land, and the land was cared for and stewarded. So when ownership and land purchases began to happen, the process were unbeknownst to Kānaka. Therefore, much of the land was lost, right? You look at the loss of life. As diseases and various viruses came to the islands, without the prior need of vaccinations, our Kānaka population was hit hard. Thousands of people lost their lives, and the trauma that they faced must have been extremely overwhelming. Droves and droves of people were dying, hundreds. In 1778, over 500,000 pure Hawaiians existed. In 1893, we went down to 40,000 pure Hawaiians. In 1993, 100 years later, we went down to 8,711. And in 2044, our demographics predict that there will not be one pure Hawaiian left. That's 20 years from now, 21 years from now. We already have more Hawaiians living in the continent or out of state than we do today. Majority of our Hawaiians are not here in Hawaii. Oops.
The fact that
What happened?
Native
Our loss of cultural pride. When you experience all of the traumatic events, right, that began the process of cultural oppression and loss of pride. Imagine being told that everything you knew about life was wrong. It was barbaric. It was sinful. And we continue to experience the impact of that trauma and colonization today. However, that trauma, as we talked about, continues to play out in many of our families today. So what are some of the thoughts running through your mind and heart as you reflect on the traumatic experiences that Native Hawaiians and other cultures experience? Because not just our Native Hawaiians experience that trauma. Many of our families that were connected to immigrant families, right, coming over to work in the plantations, were also impacted by that trauma. What are some of the traumas or losses you experience, and how has it impacted you and your own ohana? Where do you think historical trauma continues to play a role in the ohana today? Just some questions to think about. And lastly, how does it impact your engagement with ohana in your own work? How does it show up in the work that you do today with families and with keiki and ohio? Can you see it? See, for Native Hawaiians and many other peoples, because traditions and cultural practices are timeless, they serve many purposes, right? It helps to build our identity, helps to make connections with our piko, helps us recall upon our ancestral memory. It provides a sense of belonging, it strengthens purpose, it perpetuates practices, It replaces the hurt by historical trauma and traumatic experiences, and it creates a renewed positive trajectory for future generations. It heals. So we have seen throughout the years a lively resurgence of Native Hawaiian culture and practices. We are witnessing a cultural endurance and resiliency today. When you look at now our revitalization of our language, we have, you know, Ahakunana Leo. We have our Kulakaya Puni in our schools. Our spiritual and our cultural practices are now being practiced throughout our ʻāina. When you look at, you know, our hula, our oli, our pule, what else? You know, lua, all of these different things, la'au lapa'au, our medicinal plants, you know, we're bringing all of those things back. Our restoration of land rights, you know, rights to the vai, to the water, rights to like Mauna Kea. When you think about what all of that things that happen at Mauna Kea, at Haleakala, right? We're now fighting for those things because now we know better. Native Hawaiian health practices are being honored, right? And looked at as a viable option for Native Hawaiians to tap into. And then ultimately it's return of our cultural pride. And now we can be proud of the people that we are and where we came from and our ancestors. And today we're trying to draw back that ancestral wisdom. And so as many people, I'm not real, you know, āina smart, as they say, but I try to practice bringing that ike kupuna into the work that I do today with families and with keiki. And part of the resilience of revitalization of our people is understanding fundamental Hawaiian values. So when we're talking about keiki well-being, it's really understanding the root of where we come from, right? So those fundamental values, first being aloha. Ua ola loko ike aloha. Love gives life within. From Auntie Mary Kavena Pukui. Aloha is an emotion that spans a gamut of feelings put into action. You know, love, empathy, and compassion. It is what drives and motivates the action of Kānaka ʻōiwi. You know, aloha describes feelings that range from love to sympathy to misfortune. It moves the Kānaka ʻōiwi to want to give, even if when they only have a little bit to give, they want to give. Aloha guides the Kānaka ʻōiwi to pay attention to what is not being said, more what is not being said, more than what is being said, right? Aloha is felt in the deepest part of our core being, our na'au. So when you break down the word aloha, alo, frontal, present, face, right? Alo. Then you have ha, the life-giving breath. Aloha, to be present as we share our breath with one another. So it's not like aloha, 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 aloha. It's no, I'm present, I'm with you, I'm sharing with you my breath. Yeah. So powerful. When you think about the way that our kupuna would greet each other and they would exchange their breath. You know, they didn't shake hands, right? They would hone each other with their lai touching each other, the forehead to forehead, and they would breathe in their very essence, right? So when they hone each other, That was that aloha, that exchange of aloha, that love-giving, life-giving breath. That, when you talk about what draws people to these islands, right? It's that spirit of aloha they talk about. That's actually what we have that in our Hawaiian legislative, you know, our, what do you call, statutes, right? The aloha spirit. That's what draws people here. And when you think about our keiki, how we view keiki, this olelo no ea reflects how we view them in the lens of a Kānaka ʻōiwi society. That keiki are compared to the lei, the garlands of pua, the flowers that are fragrant and placed around the neck of the one who is gifted and worn close to the heart. In the case of this olelo no ea, we see that the keiki placed in different spaces in the arms, right? On the back and around the neck, all of which shows the kuleana one has to care for the keiki. I mean, I think this is a beautiful, beautiful olelo no ea, because it compares once again the child to the lei, right? And when you look at a lei, it's visually beautiful. It's wonderfully fragrant. Well, sometimes our keiki is a little bit hauna, but you know, most of the time they're fragrant and they're extremely fragile. When you look at a pua, yeah, you kind of like press on a pua, you're a little bit harsh on a pua, what happens? They bruise. They bruise easily, right? And that is the reason why I think for many of our olelo no ea, when you read our old Hawaiian proverbs, right? And the poems that come out, it correlates a keiki with a pua. I think a lot of it has to do with the fragility that a pua has, right? It's dependency on the plant to make sure the pua grows and blossoms into its full potential. And that's our role as we care for our keiki. You know, extreme admiration was given to a lei, that we would offer a lei in a time of celebration, in a time of honoring someone. We still do it today, right? But back in the day, I know when I was growing up, I know I'm showing my age, we couldn't go to a lei stand and buy leis. You had to make your lei. You wanted to give a lei, you had to make your lei, right? So you had to go out, you had to pick the pua, you had to take time. And I remember my mom used to always tell me, now don't you be thinking, be all nuha, don't be upset. You know, when you're picking these flowers, you got to visualize the person that you're going to give this flower, this lei to. So when you're picking, good mana is going into these flowers, so that when you actually sow the lei, right, you're putting all that good mana and that good feelings into that lei. So the lei gonna last long, and the person is going to when they accept that lei, they're going to be filled with your good mana. It's kind of like when you cook, yeah, you remember you're not supposed to like wash rice or mix poi when you're upset, because when sawa the poi real quick, or the rice can go bad, or you know, it's that same kind of thinking around the flower, that you take care of the flower. And then traditionally, a lei was never cast aside after it was used to serve its purpose. It would be returned to the āina. So you wouldn't like throw them in the trash can. You would return the flowers back to the āina. So even like today, like when my leis make, right? That I take it and I place it, you know, in the garden, so that eventually it'll turn to fertilizer for the next lei. So going back to that, okay, if we really look at our keiki as a pua, whether you're part of paddling in the canoe together or you're working in the lo'i together, it all demonstrates that everyone working together and everyone's kulana, their role is important. And these are the metaphors both emphasize the importance of working together, right? The va'a, the lo'i. Everyone has different roles and responsibilities created to work in unison with each other. Notice it wasn't one person, it was many people working together to ensure that the canoe moves forward or the kalo grows to feed the ohana, and the ohana can thrive. So once again, interdependency. So let's talk about ohana. As we learned earlier, ohana is much more than our immediate ohana. It includes our kupuna, right? Living and deceased elders, and supports one receives from the community. And those who we call as part of our ohana might be different. You know, our ohana can extend to multiple people. And within our ohana, similarly to like a va'a, a canoe, everyone has that role to make sure that ohana thrives. So, imaikai no ke kalo I ka oha, the goodness of the kao is judged by the fine young plants it produces. The next fundamental value is malama. When you look at this olelo, kale haule ole, te keiki, a lei that is never cast aside is one's child. So just as we talked about the lei never be thrown away, right, with pau, that we would never cast aside our child, that we would care for our child as if we would a lei, to protect, to maintain, to attend to. You know, a lot of people, they say, yeah, but Hawaiians, there's Hawaiians, you know why you're on the top of the child welfare system is because you guys, part of your culture is corporal punishment, giving lickings. That's Hawaiian, giving dirty lickings, right? Where you get whacked all the time, and that's why you end up in the system. Well, funny, because that was never part of the Hawaiian culture. It was never part of our the Native Hawaiian culture to hit a child. That came with colonization. A lot of people don't want to believe that, but it's true. We never used to hit the child. How can we have all this olelo no eo that talks about how precious a child is, right? And how we care for the child and we caress the child and all of, you look at all the old documentation in reference to a child, it's all about caring and loving and honoring a child. You don't see beating, you don't see bruising, you don't hear about any of that. That happened when colonization, and actually, you know, that punishment happened in a lot of the missionary homes, right? And they took that scripture. If you spare the rod, if you don't use the rod, you spoil the child, right? Spare the rod, spoil the child. Any of you heard that before? So it's like, oh, I gotta spank you, because if I don't spank you, you can be spoiled. Well, if you really look at the Hebrew, because the original language, right, of the Bible, the Hebrew, when you look at that word rod, that rod is a shepherd's rod. A shepherd's rod was never used to beat a sheep. Okay, that rod, you know how it goes like this and has the hook? It was long because a sheep, when the sheep would, you know, back in the day, they would graze over pasture land, right? And the sheep would go over and was gonna fall off the cliff. It was quick enough where the shepherd could go quick and grab that sheep and pull it from falling off the edge. And then it also was used to guide the sheep. That's why it's long. So when you think about a shepherd's rod, that's exactly it. Does that scripture make sense? Spare the rod, spoil the child. Yeah, it does. It means that if you don't protect your child, if you don't guide your child, if you don't protect your child from falling off the cliff, like a shepherd's rod, right? You don't give them the parameters in which to dwell, the rules, the consequences, and all of that. Yes, they will become spoiled. But it's not meant to hit. The rod was not a hitting rod. Now, someone say, well, but they used to hit the sheep. Yeah, it was like a rod about this big, like a little club. And what they would do is when the sheep would come into, the corrals, they would like kind of hit the sheep to like, if they start biting each other, because, they got bugs and stuff like that. They would hit the sheep to get some of the cuckoos off, right? Off them. And then also to get them from not fighting with each other or biting each other. And so they would just nudge them with that boom, boom, real quick. Pa'i, yeah, pa'i, but not beat. So when they say that, so I know people have used that scripture, that's why that says, and not that I'm trying to preach any kind of religion to you, but I know people have used that scripture as a comeback saying, well, that's part of your culture because Hawaiians hit their kids. That wasn't. Okay, so just setting the record straight, that was not part of our culture. So when you look at the role of a parent, well, if it's not to hit, then what do we do? Well, I use a metaphor of an ipu. When you think of an ipu or gourd, you picture a very fragile vessel, right? This particular gourd is an ipuvai or huivai, and it's used specifically to carry out our most precious resource, which is water, right? So ipus will grow all different kinds of shapes and sizes. Well, when you would get a gourd like this with the naturally developed spout, we would use that as the ipuvai to carry water because it has the spout on it. So I'd like to imagine that the ipuvai as a perfect metaphor to our role of parents and caregivers. Makua have such an important role of nurturing and caring for one of our most precious and vulnerable members of our ohana, our keiki. Teachers have the same kind of kuleana, right? And yet in our own humanity, they too can be considered fragile and vulnerable with this important kulana, this role. The kuleana can be daunting, right? And joyful at the same time. I have 6 kids and, sometimes it can be pretty daunting. But then when I think about the most joyous times I had in my life, it's probably times that I've had with my children. So just as if you were to drop a gourd, right, or an ipu, it can easily crack and the water, right, can start to leak out. Parents too, we might have incidents when we crack, resulting in our relationship or our cleanup with our children to be negatively impacted, right? Sometimes our relationship can be screwed because it's like we crack, we lost it, yeah, because we're human. But it's important for us to ensure that these makua don't lose heart, for us to lead them to the proper supports and the services they need in order to ho'opono, to make things right in these situations. So we can encourage them that by seeking and following through with the help that they need, that they'll be able to patch the puka in their ipuvai, repair their relationship with their keiki, and make an effort to acknowledge that their kulana, their role, and their kuleana, their responsibilities may not be an easy one, but these responsibilities can be embraced as privileges that they get to enjoy, right? So warm is the house in which a parent dwells. Parents are judged by the behavior of their children. Pumehane, pumehana kahale ika noho ia become a kua. You know, I've worked with many, many families. And one of the things is, you know, people say, well, they don't love their kids. No, they love their kids. They're doing the best that they can with what they know, right? And so it's for us to be able to support them. Even ourselves, I learn every day how to be a better parent to my kids, because as my kids grow and they develop, I grow and I develop as a mom. And so it's a constant learning thing. And sometimes we will crack. Sometimes we won't make the best choices, you know, as teachers, as those who are working with families. But it's important for us to recognize when we start to get stressed, when we recognize we have to time out. See, I never used to give my kids time out. I used to give myself time out. I used to tell my kids, you know, mommy needs a timeout right now to just get my act together so I can be better for them. There's times when I feel like, you know, we put the onus on our children to get their act together while we remain the same. And really, when you think about it, our children look to us as their role models. And if we can show them self-care and caring for ourselves in order to be better for them, they're going to pick that up. They're going to learn that from us, right? So, laulima, working together, another very valuable fundamental value of Hawaiians. And like the traditional hukilau, our ohana cannot do it alone. As they work on patching their ipuvai, rebuilding their pilina, and they're embracing their kulana and kuleana, they need a support system. All hands are needed to uplift our ohana and our keiki, as well as each other. When we come together to kokua, right, our families and our keiki, although the load may seem pretty heavy and the tasks ahead pretty daunting, we are stronger together as a community when we laulima, when we work together. A'ohehana nui ke alaia. No task is too big when done together. So traditionally, our kupuna, our ancestors lived in lokahi. We go back to the traditional visual image of our ancestors as they believed. We were all connected, right? And whole with akua, āina, mankind. They believed that as Kānaka, or mankind, honored akua, akua in return would care for man. And as man cared for āina, āina cared for man. And it just reciprocal, right? It was that constant caring for āina, giving akua, you know, honor, and akua providing the elements to care for our āina, our soil, our ocean, our sun, the rain. And āina in return was physically and visually the display of akua's majesty and power. And so if you take the Kānaka piece, yeah, going back to this slide, you just grab the Kānaka humanity, you pull that out, we come up with its own wheel. When looking at the lokahi wheel, right? Harmony, peace. It's the segment that looks at what makes Kānaka. And in this is actually a mental health model depicting our mind, body, spirit incorporated within this wheel through our na'au, right? Our emotions, our kino, our body, our pili uhane, which is spirituality, ohana, family, kuleana, responsibility, our mana'o, our mind. So when all of these elements are working in harmony together, we have what we call lokahi. Things are in balance, right? So when lokahi is not present and the balance is off, it's probably because there's a puka in one of these areas. So it's important for us as we work with keiki and opio and ohana that we consider that each one of us are made up of these various components in our lives that makes us who we are. So when we understand this, we will be able to help to develop a relevant plan or service plan for those we serve as we concentrate our focus on giving attention to those areas that need the puka mended. Yeah, so maybe there's an area in their body that's not working well, that we need to get them connected to help support, or maybe it's their mental health, or maybe it's a relationship within their ohana that's not doing well. So that's where we come in and we help to create this lokahi within our keiki and our ohana. And finally, I want to talk to you about pu'uhonua. Let's take a look at a historically established place of refuge, sanctuary, and asylum, a place of peace and safety. We call this a pu'uhonua. I have here on the screen the pu'uhonua Ohonaunau, which is on Hawaii Island. This is the one that has been restored, that is probably the best one to get a visual depiction of what a pu'uhonua actually may have looked like back in the day. A pu'uhonua was also a place of healing and forgiveness. I want to highlight both of these primary purposes, okay, of a pu'uhonua. The first purpose was to be a place of healing and restoration. So back in the day when warriors would get injured during the time of battle, or they suffered an injury needing care, they would make their way to a pu'uhonua, or someone would take them to a pu'uhonua, and they would be tended to by nursemaids, kahuna lapa'au, our wise healers, excuse me, our wise healers that would care for them. Ooh, talking too much. Okay, sorry about that. They would care for them until they were healed and able to return back to battle or back to their community. The second purpose was for forgiveness. If someone broke a kapu, okay, so back in the day, we had a set of sacred law called the kapu system. And they broke a kapu and they experienced remorse for their trespass. They could make their way to a pu'uhonua and go through a ritual with the kahuna until they had successfully completed the process of forgiveness. Okay, so it's kind of like when they would go there, they would go through that ritual. When they were pau, they could make their way back to their hale or their kauhale, their community, and they would be forgiven, that they would not be held to that offense anymore. Okay, so that place was a place where they could feel safe, nurtured, and know that they were going to be restored and return back with none of that over their head. When you think about people who say, well, this is a pu'uhonua, is that what we're offering them? Are we offering them a place of safety, a place of acceptance and peace? Are we also offering a place of forgiveness and healing? When I think about, like, you know, we're doing a project out at, Hawaiʻi Youth Correctional Facility. We call it Kawailoa, right? The Wellness Center. And we're creating a pu'uhonua for our juvenile justice system. There's a word in there that's huge that we need to address. It's called forgiveness and restoration, right? That our youth can feel like they're forgiven for their offenses and they can be restored back to community. So when I think about pu'uhonua, I think about our own lives, right? And I want you to think, okay? You can close your eyes if you want to, but think. If you were to picture a time in your childhood that you felt scared or unsafe or insecure, where did you go to find that safety and security? Who did you seek out to find that same kind of security and safety? Picture this place and this person in your mind. And when I ask you where your pu'uhonua is, what location or place popped into your head? I know for me, it was like my parents' bed, right? Or my tutu's house, or the beach, or the river, yeah? The Hawaii, like where did you go to find that security? And when I asked you where, you know, what did it sound like? What did it look like? What did it feel like? And who was that person that you pictured when I asked you to picture that person that you would run to? What characteristics or traits did that person have that made them feel like a pu'uhonua for you? And if I was to ask the keiki you work with the same question, what would they say their safe place were? Would they say it's their hale, their home? Would they say it's their school or the program that you run? I mean, wouldn't it be awesome if the ones that we serve would mention our programs or our schools, that this is where my pu'uhonua is. This is where I feel safe. And if I were to ask them who their safe person was, would they mention their parents' name? Would they mention your name? I just want you to consider why or why not, right? If you could answer yes, they would mention my name, they would mention my program or my school, then awesome. But if you weren't sure, or maybe you couldn't with all confidence say yes, then consider, is there something you can do differently to help them make them feel like you can be that pu'uhonua, or that this place is a pu'uhonua for them? See, maybe not up until now, it hasn't. But what can you do so it will be from now on? See, you have an opportunity to model being a pu'uhonua for this keiki, this opio, and their ohana. We've all heard the saying many times before, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. It's so true, right? What do you think needs to happen in order for you to be considered a pu'uhonua for those we serve? Yeah. You know, Auntie Lynette Pavlinawan talks about this, you know, respecting the totality of form and essence. See, form is what you know intellectually, define literally, and perform literally, and with technical precision. That's the form, right? The way we do things, the processes. The essence is expressing the true meaning, the intention, the feeling behind the thought and the action in an authentic way. It is the expression of an idea with genuine feeling about your truth. It is often equated with the word kauna, the hidden deeper meaning as opposed to literal meaning. It is about behaviors and feelings that are congruent when conveying a thought. Auntie Lynette says that when we engage, we need to show up fully present. Being authentic is connecting in a holistic way with the ohana that we're serving, our peers and those that we work with. It is through our own cultural humility and the way of being that we're able to contribute to the well-being of others. So delivering our work with others with cultural humility to ensure child well-being And although there's been a lot of information shared with you to gain a perspective that will assist you in working with our Native Hawaiian ohana, as you know, the true success of your learning will be tested when you directly engage with them in this meaningful way. And be aware that one of the most unfortunate traumas that many of our Kānaka ʻōiwi families suffer from is that they have not had the same opportunity to understand why they think and feel the way they do. So be gentle in assisting them to find their resilience. It exists within them. And after this presentation, I hope that you know that this is true. Innately, they had from our ike kupuna, everything that it takes to have a healthy and vibrant ohana, and their keiki having the best well-being. So I wish you all the best as you holomua go forward in this honorable work to which you've all been called. And I just mahalo for your time in being able to present this with you. Mahalo.
Mahalo, Venus. It looks like we have a question.
Oh.
Renee, did you want to unmute and ask your question? I see your hand up.
It was a mistake. I tried to correct it, but it wouldn't let me do it.
Oh, I just go away. No worries, no worries. Did anybody else have any questions you wanted to ask Venus?
Come back to Maui. You're awesome, Venus. Every time I see you and hear you, I'm so inspired. You really get to the heart of everybody. So appreciate it.
She sure does.
Mahalo, I appreciate you.
So it's 4:30, so we're gonna go ahead and wrap up. I see a lot of mahalos to you, Venus. Thank you so much for reminding us about our kulana, our kuleana, and for us to all become a pu'uhonua for our children. Thank you so much. And thank you all for joining us.
Okay, aloha everyone. Mahalo.